Think about someone who was there at the beginning, who said they believed in you, who said they were in your corner, who said, maybe not in words, but in every way that counted, that they wanted you to win. And then you started winning, or moving, or becoming, or just deciding. And something changed. The energy shifted. The enthusiasm cooled. The presence became inconsistent. The questions started carrying a different weight. Are you sure sounded different than it used to? That seems like a lot came from someone who used to be the first to encourage you. Maybe this happened in your 30s, when you made a move that others hadn't. Maybe it happened in your 40s, when the gap between you and certain people became too wide to keep pretending it wasn't there. Maybe it is happening right now, and somewhere in the middle of that shift, you felt it. The loneliness that comes, not from being alone, but from being in a room full of people who are no longer in the same story as you. Epictetus called this not a betrayal, not an accident, not a misunderstanding, a law, one of the most reliable laws in the entire architecture of human behavior. And understanding it, really understanding it at the root, changes not just how you see those people, it changes how you see your growth. Psychologists call it social comparison theory, first proposed by Leon Festinger in 1954, and refined across decades of subsequent research. The finding is consistent and uncomfortable. Human beings evaluate their own worth, ability, and choices, in large part by comparing themselves to the people closest to them, not to strangers, not to people far outside their world, to the people in their immediate circle, the people they grew up with, the people who share their background, their starting point, their original set of circumstances. When someone in that circle begins to move, begins to diverge from the shared trajectory, it does not simply register as their success. It registers in the people who remain as a data point about their own choices. If you are moving and I am not, your movement does not only show me your progress, it reflects my stagnation back at me. And the psychological cost of that reflection is something most people are not equipped to hold. So they do not hold it. They reduce the dissonance another way. They question the movement. They introduce doubt. They find reasons why your path is risky, unrealistic, misguided, or simply not as impressive as it appears. They pull, not because they want you to fail, but because your success, in the specific mirror of their proximity to you, is something they cannot yet afford to witness clearly. This is not weakness. It is a documented, universal feature of human psychology. And at 40, 50, 60, you have seen it operate enough times to know exactly what it looks like. You just may not have had a name for it. Epictetus saw it in the 1st century AD, without the research apparatus, because he had lived it, and he had something to say about it that the research still has not quite matched. Epictetus was freed from slavery sometime around 68 AD. He did not immediately become celebrated. He did not immediately find the audience that would eventually travel across the empire to sit at his feet. He taught in Rome first, and then, when Domitian expelled the philosophers, he went to Nicopolis, to a smaller city, a harder post, fewer resources, less recognition, and he kept teaching. He did not adjust his philosophy based on who was in the room. He did not soften his teaching for students who found it too demanding. He did not pursue the patronage of powerful men who could have elevated him faster in exchange for a more comfortable version of the truth. He continued, and in the discourses, the record of his teaching, compiled by his student Arian, he addressed the exact phenomenon that happens to every man who begins to move. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid with regard to external things. Do not wish to be thought to know anything. And if some people think you are important, distrust yourself. He was not teaching detachment from other people's opinions as a performance. He was teaching it as a survival mechanism for the specific season of growth, the season where the people closest to you begin to register your movement as a judgment of their stillness. He wrote, with the precision of a man who had watched this pattern in more careers and more growth trajectories than any external obstacle ever had. Seek not that the things which happen should happen as you wish, but wish the things which happen to be as they are, and you will have a tranquil flow of life. He was not asking you to be indifferent. To the people you lose in the process of becoming. He was asking you to see the loss clearly, for what it actually is. Not a verdict on your direction, not a sign you have gone too far, not evidence that you should slow down or recalibrate toward the comfort of the people who are no longer moving with you. Information, the most reliable information available, about who was truly in your corner and who was in the corner of the version of you that had not yet moved. Those are not the same people, and the sooner you know which is which, the sooner you stop spending energy trying to bring back what was never actually there. Why does this happen with such consistency? Across cultures, across contexts, across every level of human ambition and growth. Three mechanisms, and understanding all three, is what separates the people who move through this season from the people it stops. The first, proximity, makes your growth into a mirror nobody asked to look in. There is a specific pain in watching someone from your exact starting point move further than you have. Not someone who had more, not someone who had advantages you didn't have, someone who started where you started. Same city, same family structure, same resources, same original circumstances, and is now somewhere you are not. The pain of that observation is not jealousy in the simple sense. It is the collapse of the story that says your circumstances are the reason. Because if they started where you started, and they moved, then the remaining explanation is the one nobody wants to face. The choices. Your proximity to someone who is growing is an unasked for interrogation of every choice they have made since you shared a starting point. Most people cannot hold that interrogation without reacting, and the reaction does not always look like resentment. Sometimes it looks like concern. Sometimes it looks like caution. Sometimes it looks like people who love you asking very reasonable questions about whether you are being realistic. If you are 45 or 55, you have heard those questions more than once from people who were supposed to be in your corner. The delivery is different. The mechanism is the same. The second, the people who needed you to stay will resist your moving without knowing that is what they are doing. Some people in your circle, not all but some, have built a version of themselves. That depends, in part, on your proximity to them, your willingness to be available, your willingness to remain in the shared dynamic, your willingness to be the person they have always known you as. When you begin to move, not just externally, not just in achievement, but in how you think, what you tolerate, what you are willing to spend your time on, the dynamic shifts, and the shift threatens something in them. That has nothing to do with you, and everything to do with what your presence was giving them. This is not manipulation in the conscious sense. It is the automatic, unexamined response of a person whose identity was partly constructed in relationship to yours, and who has not yet found a version of themselves. That does not require you to stay still. Their resistance is real. Their discomfort is real. Their feeling of loss is real. And none of it is information about your direction. All of it is information about theirs. I want to pause here, because this is the part that the philosophy can make sound cleaner than it is. Losing people hurts, even when you understand the mechanism, even when you can trace exactly why it is happening, even when you know, intellectually, clearly, that the loss is information rather than verdict. It still costs something. The people who went quiet when you started moving, some of them mattered. Some of them were people you had counted on for decades. Some of them were people whose presence you assumed would be permanent. And at this point in your life, having built what you have built, having been through what you have been through, those losses sit differently. They are not the easy kind to reframe. Some of them you are still carrying. Epictetus does not ask you to be unmoved by that. He asks you not to let it stop you. There is a difference. You are allowed to grieve what the growth costs. You are not allowed to use that grief as a reason to stop growing. Because the people who are meant to be in the room, when you arrive at the next level, cannot find you. If you stay where the others were comfortable, the loss is real. The direction is still right. Hold both. That is the Stoic position. Not coldness, not indifference. The willingness to carry the cost of becoming, without letting it become the reason to stop. The third, and the one that changes the lens permanently. The people who disappear when you grow are not failing you. They are revealing themselves. And that revelation, painful as it is one of the most valuable pieces of information your growth can give you, because you cannot build the next chapter with people who are invested in the previous one, not because they are bad, not because the history was meaningless, not because what you shared was not real, but because the architecture of what you are building requires people who can hold the weight of who you are becoming, not just the comfort of who you were. Every person who distances themselves when you begin to move is showing you, with their behavior, that they were built for a version of you that no longer exists. That is not a loss. That is a clearing, and in the space that clearing creates, if you do not collapse back toward the familiar, if you do not slow down to keep the peace, if you do not make yourself smaller, to make others comfortable, the people who belong in the next chapter will find the room to arrive. They always do, but only if the room is not still full of people you kept, because letting them go felt harder than letting yourself grow. Here is how you move through this season without losing yourself in it. 3 steps. The last one is the most important thing in this entire series. Step 1. Audit your circle with honesty, not judgment. Look at the 5 people you spend most time with. For each one question. Does this person's presence in my life require me to be a smaller version of myself? In any consistent way, not smaller in a single conversation. Consistently smaller. Where you edit what you say, where you downplay what you are doing, where you feel the pull to perform a version of yourself that fits the dynamic, rather than the version you are actually becoming. That edit, that consistent contraction, is the signal. You are not looking for bad people. You are looking for a mismatch between who you are becoming and who the relationship requires you to be. Some of these relationships will have been in your life for decades. That length of time is not a reason to stay contracted inside them. It is a reason to be honest about what they are costing you. Name it. Not to end the relationship immediately, to see it clearly, because you cannot navigate what you have not named. Step 2. Stop managing how your growth lands on other people. This is the behavior that keeps more men stuck in the wrong season, longer than any other. The adjusting of the announcement, the downplaying of the achievement, the softening of the direction, so that it does not make the people around you too uncomfortable. Stop. Not because you don't care about them, because the management is not working. The discomfort they feel about your growth is not caused by how loudly you announce it. It is caused by the contrast it creates. You can downplay everything, speak quietly about every achievement, minimize every move, deflect every acknowledgement, and the discomfort in the people who are not moving will not reduce, because it is not about the noise. It is about the mirror, and the mirror does not get softer, because you are quiet about your reflection. Move, grow, become, without the management, without the apology, without the performance of smallness, designed to make the room more comfortable, at the cost of your own direction. You have been doing this long enough to know what it costs. Stop paying it. Step 3, and this is the one that matters most. Decide, now, who you are building toward, not who you are leaving behind, not who has disappointed you, not who has gone quiet or turned cold or pulled away. Who you are building toward, the next version, the person on the other side of the growth that is currently costing you relationships. Write down 3 qualities of that person, not achievements. Qualities. How he carries himself, what he tolerates and what he does not, how he moves through rooms, how he treats the people who stayed. 3 qualities. Written down tonight. Read every morning for 30 days. Because the Stoics did not teach growth as an achievement to reach. They taught it as a daily orientation, a direction you choose every morning. Before the resistance arrives, before the people who need you to stay make their case, before the grief of the losses makes the familiar feel safer than the forward. At 40, 50, 60, you know this pull. You have felt it for years. The familiar has had longer to dig in, which means the orientation matters more, not less. Marcus wrote it every morning. Epictetus taught it every day. Seneca wrote it in letters to a friend, knowing that the letters would outlast them both. They were not writing about who they had been. They were orienting toward who they were still becoming. You do the same, every morning, until it is no longer an effort, until it is simply who you are. You came into this series with something you already knew. You knew the gap between who you are and who you are capable of being. You knew the standards you had been refusing to set, the silence you had been filling with explanation, the boundaries you had been letting move, the reactions you had been letting happen to you, the comfort you had been choosing over growth, the action you had been hiding from behind knowledge, the respect you had been pursuing in ways that destroyed it. You knew, and if you are honest, you have known for years, not weeks, years, which means the gap is older than this series, and the cost of it is larger than most men admit. 8 laws, 8 confrontations, 8 times the same essential truth, arrived from a different direction. Marcus Aurelius, who led an empire, and chose the harder thing every morning. Seneca, who operated inside a court that wanted him dead, and built quiet authority from the inside out. Epictetus, who was owned, and became the most internally free man in Rome. 3 men, across centuries of distance, under conditions that would have justified every compromise, every retreat, every concession, to comfort and to fear. And they chose otherwise, not because they did not feel the cost, not because it was easy, not because the circumstances were right, because they had decided, each of them, in their own way, with their own vocabulary, who they were going to be. And they held that decision, every day, against every pressure, against every loss, against every voice, external and internal, that offered them a smaller version of themselves, and called it wisdom. You are old enough to know that voice well. It has been speaking to you for a long time. It knows your name. It knows exactly which losses to point to. It is very persuasive. The people who are pulling away, as you become who you are capable of being. Epictetus would look at them and say, they are showing you who they are. He would look at you and say, something harder. He would say, now you know. What are you going to do with the room? 8 laws. Yours now. Go build something. They'll have to go quiet about. Subscribe. This channel is building a body of work for the men who are in the middle of the becoming, not the ones who have arrived, not the ones still deciding whether to start, the ones already in it, already paying the cost, already moving.